Okay, so when we are storing the records into the file systems, actually it will be more complicated because the records, they may have different lengths, especially for the attributes, right? Sometimes the attributes will have their length will be, and they can be different, right? For the records with a fixed length, then the storage of the record will be much easier. And this kind of type of information can be stored in the system catalogers. And we can also find the ith field of the record very easily. So formally, we can store a record in this manner. It will be inside a block. The format for each of the fields, we can have a length for the fields because we know this length will be fixed or will be the same among all the records, right? Similar for the field 2, we also know the length will be L2, and L3 for field 3, and L4 will be for the field 4. And normally for the record, we will have one base address or the starting address for the record, right? And based on this base address, we will be able to access all the fields very easily, just plus the length of the previous fields, right? For example, if we want to access the field 1, we just use the beginning address or the base address directly. If we want to access the field 2, we just use the base address plus L1, right, as the beginning address for the field 2. Similar for field 3, the beginning address will be B plus L1 and L2. And similar for the field 4, right? In this kind of storage, we assume the field lengths, they are all the same among all the records, and we know this kind of length in advance. And besides the record information, actually in the real world, when we are storing them into files, we need to add append more information to the records. In the header, for the record header, it can have several different kinds of information to be stored as well, like the pointer to the schema. In this way, we are able to find the fields of the records very easily as well as the type information, right? And the length of the whole record, it denotes the skip over record without consulting the schema. And with this length, we know how long the record will be, right? And the timestamp for the record to be not modified or read. And so by appending this header to the record, the complete representation of the record will be like this. We'll have a header, right? This header part has 3 entries. The first part will be the pointer pointing to the schema, right? And the second entry will be the length of the whole record. And the last one will be the timestamp for the last editing or reading of the record. And after it, we will have the fields of the record with a fixed length, right? Which should be 4. However, in the real world, when we are storing the data into a database system, for many of the fields, their length will be dynamic, will be different, right? And they will also be changing. For example, for the previous page, we show that for some of the strings, their length will be VAR, right? The length will be dynamic, actually. For this kind of fields with different lengths, the storage method will be very different. Here we have an example. Let's assume we have a record with 4 fields, and for the fields 1 and field 2, they have a fixed length among all the records. However, for the field 3 and field 4, the length will be different and variable among different records. In other words, for this kind of fields, if we want to access their starting address, we may need to have some pointers pointing to the starting address of this field instead, right? At the bottom of this page, we show how to store this kind of variable length record into the file system. The representation is very similar. However, for the header, the entries are slightly different. The first entry denotes some other header information like the pointers pointing to the schema as well as last editing time, timestamps, right? And we also have an entry for the length of the whole record. And we have 2 more entries as pointers pointing to the fields with dynamic length. So this pointer will be pointing to the starting address of field 4. This one will be pointing to the starting address of field 3. Because these 2 will have dynamic length. And we also mentioned before, right? If we want to store a string with dynamic length into the database system or into a file system, we may need to add some null value denoting the ending of the strings. So normally the null value will take 2 bytes for storing it, and sometimes it can also take 0 bytes at the very end of the string, right? So therefore, we also need to consider the null value of these entries for storing some strings, right? In considering this length for these fields, if there are some VAR strings. Okay, so this is a way for storing the variable length records into the database system. It will be slightly different than the previous one with fixed length, right?